Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the subcommittee at any time. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on leaving Indian children behind, reviewing the state of the BIE schools. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at the hearing are limited to the chairman and the ranking member. I therefore ask unanimous consent that all other members' statements be made part of the hearing record, if they are submitted in accordance with Committee Rule 3.0. Without objection, so ordered. I now ask unanimous consent that the following members be allowed to sit and participate in today's hearing. The gentleman from California, Mr. Doug Lamalfa. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Tim Wahlberg. The gentleman from Utah, Ms. Celeste Malloy. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Andy Biggs. The gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Dusty Johnson. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Eli Crane. And the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Rob Downing. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize the full committee chair, Mr. Westerman, for an opening statement. Is he here yet? No?
He's down the hall.
Okay. Is he walking down this way? No. Good afternoon. I would like to take a moment to welcome our witnesses, some of whom traveled across the country to be here. I would especially like to welcome Chairman Valesquez, who represents the White Mountain Apache tribe from my home state of Arizona, as well as Ms. Becenti, who is the head of school at the Navajo Preparatory School in Farmington, which also welcomes many of the children from Arizona each year. Thank you for coming before the committee today to review the current state of the BIE and tribally controlled elementary and secondary schools, examine their deferred maintenance and repairs backlog, and discuss how deferred maintenance can negatively impact Indian students' education. During the last Congress, the committee launched an investigation into the BIE schools, including Haskell Indian Nations University. Now, as President Trump seeks to root out fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government, the committee is committed to expanding our oversight work during the 119th Congress. BIE schools have long suffered from a lack of oversight and the accountability. In 1928, a survey of Indian education facilities found that conditions were deplorable. In the last century, these conditions have not improved nearly enough. For those who have never been to a BIE school, I want to be clear on a few things. Of the 83 schools, they're often not only the only schools in the area, but the only safe places for children in very remote areas. And when I say remote, I want you to think about the Havasupai Elementary School in Arizona. The only way to access this school, which is located at the floor of the Grand Canyon, is by an 8-mile hike, mule, or a helicopter. I can guarantee you those teachers and students are not taking helicopter rides to that school. As numerous OIG and GAO reports note, BIE schools have racked up a mountain of deferred maintenance due to mismanagement. Delays mean the BIE schools either close or force children to learn in buildings without heat during frigid winter days. Delays mean an inability to feed children because of spoiled food in the broken refrigerators. Delays mean students struggling to focus as rainwater leaks into their classroom. This dilapidated infrastructure also presents serious security concerns. Though many schools around the country are equipped with cameras, outdoor lights, and other access control measures, BIE schools largely have open and unprotected campuses. School buses and grounds are repeatedly vandalized. Strangers regularly walk onto BIE campuses, enter the school buildings, and risk the safety of students and staff. These issues extend into BIE schools' housing facilities. BIE schools are sometimes located in remote locations, forcing students and staff to either travel great distances daily or to live in ramshackle dormitories. This lack of acceptable housing significantly increases staff turnover, which strips students of the stability provided by an established caregiver. These problems are all made worse by BIE's refusal to insulate itself from the fraud, waste, and abuse. Since 1990, GAO has kept a high-risk list of federal government programs that are especially vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse and mismanagement or in need of transformation. BIE's Administration of Schools for American Indian Students, its 183 elementary and secondary schools, have been on a high-risk list for years. In addition to poor conditions at the school's facilities that endanger students, GAO found that BIE was continuously ignored its duty to support its schools and to oversee how federal funds are used. In the last 12 years alone, GAO has delivered BIE 32 recommendations for action items to effectively improve school administration, increase school safety, rigorously account for funds, and to ensure proper tracking of work orders. At least a dozen of these recommendations, including those related to the annual fiscal reviews, monitoring purchase card use, and implementing policies related to school technology needs, have been ignored. OIG has scrutinized BIE schools and handed the Bureau recommendations that has yet to be adequately addressed. These recommendations include developing and implementing processes for tracking deferred maintenance, work orders, and training staff to accurately open, classify, update, and close work orders. An OIG report published earlier this week highlights some of the consequences of BIE's long-standing negligence. In the report, OIG identified that BIE hired a contractor to help address its deferred maintenance backlog and resolve inaccuracies in BIE facility management systems. Rather than satisfactorily perform, the contractor proceeded to improperly close 58% of the open significant deficiency orders at one school and thousands of work orders across 127 other BIE tribal schools. Instead of checking the contractor's work and terminating the contract as soon as the contractor's shoddiness became apparent, BIE inappropriately modified the contract and awarded an additional $535,420. You can't make this stuff up. This waste, fraud, and abuse must be not allowed to be continued. Students at BIE schools nationwide deserve better. I am determined to shine a bright light on BIE's ineptitude and look forward to bipartisan discussion that is robust regarding efficiently addressing BIE schools, deferred maintenance backlog, so that Indian students have a healthy environment where they can grow and learn in the American dream. I now yield to the ranking member, Ms. Dexter, for her opening statement.
Thank you so much, Chair Gozar. I certainly appreciate you starting off this Congress and the subcommittee with a topic that we can both agree is a serious problem. I hope we can pursue our oversight responsibility in a constructive way by identifying issues of bipartisan concern, even if our proposed solutions to the problem may differ. I also hope that while we may have spirited debates, that we can do so in good faith and respectfully. The need for oversight in our jurisdiction far exceeds our capacity, so we must focus our work wisely. And thank you to our witnesses today for the long distances you've come and for the commitment that you have to this issue. We all agree that the education and well-being of our tribal students is a paramount priority. We are here to discuss a crisis that has persisted for far too long. Deferred maintenance and structural issues at Bureau of Indian Education schools. These schools, which serve tens of thousands of tribal students across the country, are not just places of learning. They are the heart of their communities. They represent opportunity, cultural preservation, and the promise of a better future. Yet, too many of these schools are crumbling before our eyes. Decades of underfunding, delays, and inaction have left students in facilities that are unsafe, outdated, and in some cases, outright hazardous. Leaky roofs, failing HVAC systems, black mold, and structural deficiencies are the daily reality for students and educators in these schools. Though the Government Accountability Office and the Department of the Interior's Inspector General have repeatedly documented the severity of the crisis, we continue to see unacceptable delays in addressing these issues. The consequences of inaction are dire. The conditions of school facilities have a direct impact on student achievement, attendance, and overall well-being. Native students already face significant education disparities, including lower graduation rates, higher rates of absenteeism, and higher teacher turnover. When their schools are in disrepair, these disparities only worsen. As our witnesses will highlight today, resolving deferred maintenance starts with ensuring these schools and the Bureau itself have the funding and staffing necessary to properly track and address maintenance needs. Schools do not have enough personnel to conduct regular inspections, apply for necessary funding, or oversee critical repairs. Without adequate staffing and oversight, problems that should be addressed immediately continue to linger for years, worsening the crisis. Alongside increased funding, Congress should prioritize mandatory funding for Section 105L leases, which allow tribes to be compensated for the use of their facilities for federal functions. 105 leasing has become increasingly popular to advance tribal control over education and address maintenance issues, while the backlog at BIE is addressed. But discretionary funding prevents it from being utilized to its full potential. Congress has made progress in recent years by securing increased funding for school construction and maintenance through the Great American Outdoors Act. We must ensure these funds are deployed and implemented quickly and efficiently to reduce the backlog of deferred maintenance. However, we are hearing that Senate Republicans want to remove that funding too when the program is reauthorized. We can't fix an underfunding problem by further underfunding. The federal government has a trust and treaty responsibility to provide quality education for tribal students, and that responsibility includes ensuring that their schools are safe and modern. Following this hearing, I will be sending a letter to President Trump emphasizing the concern expressed by many tribal organizations that his executive orders will deprive their communities of critical resources to support tribal education. Tribes are owed assurance that these orders will not undermine our trust in treaty obligations. I invite my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in this request. Tribal students deserve more than broken promises and temporary fixes. They deserve real and full investment in their futures. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and working together to meet our funding obligations to the tribes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I thank you, Mrs. Dexter. Now, I'm going to introduce our witnesses for our first panel. Oh, yeah. I'll now introduce the full chairman of the full committee, Mr. Westerman, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar. I thought you were going to leave me out there for a
I
minute,
didn't
but
see.
that's okay. And I also want to point out that I think it's unique, especially for our hearing today, that one of our committee members, Chairman Wahlberg, is the chairman of the House Education and Workforce Committee, and it's great to have you on the committee and here for the hearing today. Again, thank you, Chairman Gosar and Ranking Member Dexter, and to the witnesses for being here. You know, as we speak, the National Indian Education Association is hosting their 2025 Hill Week, and just last week, the American Indian Higher Education Consortium celebrated National Tribal College Week. Accordingly, this hearing to review the state of BIE schools and their deferred maintenance backlogs could not come at a better time. Education is an issue that's probably near and dear to all of our hearts. Before I was elected to Congress, before I was elected to the state legislature, the first office I ever got elected to serve in was on a local school board. I often joke that I ran for the legislature so I could get off of the school board. It's if anybody that's ever served on one of those knows what it's like. Many members of my family are teachers. I have an older brother that's he's retired. He was a teacher and a principal at one time. My wife is a special education teacher. I have nieces and nephews and even a son that's in college getting ready to go into the teaching profession. So it's unsurprisingly, it is difficult for students to excel when their school facilities are deteriorating. The most recent analysis of BIE student standardized test scores showed that students at BIE schools performed at least 2 grade levels below the national average. This means that while an average 9-year-old child in the United States learns to solve multiplication and division, a similarly aged student in a BIE school could be learning the basic addition and subtraction. Even compared to Indian students from the same community enrolled in the nearest public school, BIE students regularly tested behind their peers. Worse yet, BIE's own data evaluating the math and reading proficiency of students with disabilities does not show a single proficient student in any grade level, regardless of testing accommodations. These statistics aren't acceptable, but sadly, they're predictable. How can we expect BIE students to excel when their classrooms are crumbling around them? For example, when OIG investigators visited BIE elementary and secondary schools in Arizona and New Mexico, they found corroding pipes, inoperable boilers, and foundation issues. Other inspections noted serious health hazards like an absence of emergency exit signs, non-existent fire alarm systems, and asbestos. And rather than make necessary repairs plaguing BIE schools so that students can concentrate on algebra instead of their classroom structural integrity, the Bureau consistently postpones maintenance. As of September 2022, BIE education facilities across the country had accumulated more than $1 billion in deferred maintenance. Numerous GAO and OIG reports have highlighted BIE's inability not only to address the backlog, but also to accurately account for it. One report found that more than 1,000 work orders were not completed more than 20 years after being submitted. In many cases, open work orders were marked as complete and vice versa. Because BIE's deferred maintenance data is inaccurate and incomplete, prioritizing projects and allocating funds is increasingly difficult, which further allows BIE school conditions to decline. I want to close with this thought. For almost 100 years, poor conditions in tribal schools have been investigated by both Congress and the Department of the Interior. 100 years. I would like to challenge everyone in this room on a bipartisan basis to begin with this hearing and commit to finding solutions to ending this 100-year-old problem today. We have a unique opportunity to move forward, and I hope that all will accept this challenge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank the chairman for his kind words. Hey, before I introduce the ranking member for the full committee, folks, I know there's a lot of people standing here. There's an overflow room that's down there at 1324, down at the end of the hall. And so if you'd like to go down there, you'll see us, you'll feel us, you'll hear us. All the things that you won't do is we'll be in present. So if you want to get down there, and that'll help you out. I now introduce the ranking member from California, Jared Huffman, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see all of you, but especially the tribal leaders and educators who are with us today. And I want to take a moment to congratulate Dr. Dexter on her new role as ranking member of this subcommittee. She has my full confidence both in her commitment to bipartisanship when it serves the public good and her willingness to do something very important right now if we're going to continue to be a separate and equal branch of government, and that is scrutinize the Trump administration and hold it accountable when necessary. Based on the first chaotic and lawless weeks of this administration, I think we're going to have our hands full in that regard. Turning to today's hearing, though, we are discussing a crisis that's gone unaddressed for far too long, the unacceptable state of Bureau of Indian Education schools. This ongoing crisis is not an abstract debate about numbers on a budget sheet. It's about whether tribal students who are owed a quality education by law and by treaty can safely attend school without fear of a roof caving in, of some toxic mold in their classrooms or drinking water that makes them sick. For years, the GAO and the Interior Department's Inspector General have repeatedly found that BIE's system for tracking maintenance needs is riddled with inaccuracies, mismanagement, and delays. Their report also reveals the primary cause of this problem, and we can beat up on the faceless bureaucrats all we want, but lack of funding has to be part of this conversation. Schools and BIE itself don't have the resources or the staffing to maintain accurate records, leading to serious gaps in tracking and in addressing urgent maintenance needs. As a result, faculty and students are stuck in dangerously dilapidated buildings with leaking roofs, toxic mold, contaminated drinking water, and electrical hazards. And when issues are resolved, there isn't the manpower to update the system, further distorting the data and masking the true extent of the problem. This is an unmanageable situation for sure. Without meaningful support, it is only going to get worse. But let's be clear, the problem is the direct result of Congress failing to fund these schools at the level required to meet even basic safety standards and needs. The numbers tell the story. The Tribal Interior Budget Council estimates the need for school facility replacement and construction, fiscal year 2025, is about $6.2 billion. But guess where how much we're actually funding? A meager $260 million annually. Think about that, $6.2 billion in need and a funding reality of $260 million. According to BIE, That $6.2 billion is just what's needed to address schools in poor condition that haven't received funding yet. It doesn't account for schools that have already been assigned funding from that small pot of money, and the true need is therefore going to be much greater and growing every single year. But instead of addressing this funding crisis, our friends across the aisle have repeatedly proposed cuts. For example, their 2024 appropriations bill, House Republicans proposed cutting $211.1 million from BIE's funding request. Under the Trump administration, annual funding for BIE school construction was between $60 million and $80 million, a fraction of what is needed to keep schools safe and functional. So we have made some progress in recent years. I'm grateful for that, notably through increased funding for school construction and maintenance provided by the Great American Outdoors Act, as the chair mentioned. But now it sounds like Senate Republicans want to eliminate that funding as part of reauthorizing that law. We need to stand together and oppose that. Let's be clear, you cannot solve an underfunding crisis by cutting funds even more. That's just common sense. Doing that defies logic, and we need to oppose it. Stripping these resources would be a major setback for tribal students and communities that have already been waiting too long for the safe, modern schools they deserve. So I hope colleagues on both sides of the aisle will not be so cynical as to participate in a hearing about this crisis, express our concern about this crisis, one largely created by Congress's refusal to fund BIE properly, and then just turn around and make cuts that make the situation worse. I hope no one is so cynical as to do that in this Congress. The federal government has a trust and treaty obligation to ensure tribal students receive the education they deserve in safe, well-maintained schools. We have to prioritize investment. There's a lot we can do together. I hope today's conversation is a start on that path. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from California. I now will recognize and introduce our witnesses for the first panel. We have Miss Kathleen Sedney, Assistant Inspector General for Audits, Inspections, and Evaluations, Office of the Inspector General, U.S. Department of the Interior, Washington, D.C. And then Miss Melissa Emery-Arras, I think you got it right, Director of Education, Workforce, and Income Security Team, Government Accountability Office, or the GAO, in Washington, D.C. Let me remind you, the witnesses, that under committee rules, you must limit your statements to 5 minutes. But your entire statement will already be placed in the record. So if you begin, once you start your testimony, you'll see you have to push this on button, otherwise I can't hear you. Then you'll see these timing lights. You'll see this green, that you're going good. When you start seeing that yellow, you start wrapping it up, and when you hit that red, break. Okay? Because we got 2 panels to go through. I'll now recognize Ms. Sedney for 5 minutes.
Chairman Gosar, Ranking Member Dexter, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the Office of Inspector General's recent reports evaluating condition at BIE-funded and BIE-operated schools. As our office's work over the last 2 decades has shown, conditions at BIE schools remain a long-standing challenge. Today I will be discussing our recent work addressing health and safety deficiencies at specific schools, data quality issues at BIE's facility management system, and BIE's overall management of deferred maintenance. BIA supports and oversees a total of 183 schools. Health and safety deficiencies at these schools pose risks to both students and staff. Over the years, our office has identified serious concerns at various schools and made recommendations for improvement. In the last 10 years, we've made 62 recommendations, and approximately half of those have been implemented. In 2023, the OIG started an initiative to conduct a series of health and safety inspections at Indian schools by selecting and prioritizing review based on risk. Our objective, in part, is to determine whether these schools had addressed these conditions and issues. Since developing our risk-based plan, we have completed 3 inspections. 2 of these reports were recently published, and 1 is in progress. Our inspection reports describe the range of health and safety issues that we observed at Tate Topa Tribal School and Havasupai Elementary School. For example, we identified fire hazards, drainage issues, and roof disrepair. We found that many of the deficiencies were not addressed in a timely manner, with some remaining unaddressed for over 10 years. We also found inaccurate work order data for each school in BIE's facility management system called Maximo. BIE has agreed with all of our recommendations and has provided target dates for implementation. We will continue to monitor BIE's implementation and keep you apprised of the status. We have not limited our oversight to individual schools. For example, we recently evaluated whether BIE effectively managed deferred maintenance overall on a global level. Our findings in this report again raise concerns regarding the data quality in Maximo. DOI defines deferred maintenance as maintenance and repairs that weren't performed when they should have been. At the time of our review, however, BIE did not use this definition. Instead, all repair and maintenance requests estimated to cost more than $2,500 were automatically processed as deferred maintenance. So, for example, BIE was categorizing routine steam cleaning or janitorial services as deferred maintenance, which it's not. These errors delay completion of work and mistakenly add to BIE's backlog of deferred maintenance. Additionally, during the same review, we found other errors in the work order data. We discovered numerous deferred work orders that remained open even though the maintenance issues were addressed. We found about 54% of the work orders we sampled should have been closed in Maximo, but they were, because they were already completed, but they remained open. Conversely, we found over 1,000 work orders that had not been completed for 22 years after the repairs were requested. So, for example, there was a request submitted in 2000 to replace asbestos floor tiles, and this work order was approved, yet the work was still not completed in September 2022. This unreliable work order data means that Indian Affairs cannot accurately calculate their deferred maintenance backlog. In response to our work, BIE used a contractor to assist in helping resolve these data inaccuracies. However, during one of our recent school inspections, we found that the contractor improperly closed work orders in situations where the deficiencies weren't actually corrected. We reviewed a statistical sample of closed work orders at Tate Topa Tribal School and found that over half of them should not have been closed. After reviewing additional data, we found that the same contractor closed thousands of work orders at 127 schools. In fact, between September 2022 and July 2024, this contractor closed 89% of 85,000 work orders it had reviewed. So why does this matter? Erroneously closed work orders could change the Facility Condition Index, or the FCI rating. BIE uses an FCI to make funding decisions for repairs and replacement of schools. At Tate Topa, the school's FCI rating reportedly improved from poor to fair after the contractor had closed hundreds of work orders. Without accurate FCI data, we cannot be sure that BIE is making appropriate determinations with regard to funding, repairing, or replacing Indian schools. In our management advisory on this topic, we made 3 recommendations, which BIE agreed with. This concludes my prepared statement, and I look forward to answering your questions.
God love you. You gave us 5 seconds back. Thanks for Sedney. Now I'll recognize Ms. Emery-Arras for 5 minutes.
Chairman Gosar, Ranking Member Dexter, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss BIE's progress and challenges in supporting and overseeing schools. BIE's mission is to provide a high-quality education to approximately 46,000 students at 183 schools. BIE provides or funds a variety of programs, services, and supports to students. These include native language development and cultural enrichment. BIE also has responsibilities related to supporting schools' facilities and ensuring that school buildings and student dorms are safe places to live and learn. Since 2013, we have identified and reported on numerous problems at BIE. During this period, we have issued 24 reports and testimonies and made 38 recommendations. My statement today describes 1, problems GAO has identified with BIE's support and oversight of schools, 2, progress BIE has made in recent years, and 3, the management weaknesses that remain. In terms of the earlier problems we identified, in a 2015 report, we highlighted concerns with the accuracy and completeness of data on schools' deferred maintenance needs. We then found in 2016 that about 1/3 of all BIE schools did not receive annual safety inspections as required. We also reported on hazardous conditions we found at some BIE schools. For example, at one school, we found multiple aging boilers in a dormitory and classroom buildings that failed inspection due to elevated levels of carbon monoxide and a natural gas leak that endangered students and staff. As a result of these and other safety findings, we recommended in 2016 that the agency ensure that all BIE school facilities are annually inspected. Over the years, we have also identified a variety of issues with BIE's oversight of school spending. Our repeated findings of problems with school facility safety, oversight of school spending, and other issues indicated a broad pattern of systemic management weaknesses at BIE. As a result, in 2017, we added BIE's support and oversight of schools to GAO's high-risk list. Since 2017, BIE has taken several key steps in addressing its high-risk management weaknesses. By 2023, BIE had fully met 2 criteria for removal from the high-risk list and partially met the remaining 3 criteria. The 2 areas BIE has fully met are demonstrating leadership and developing action plans to address problems. Further, BIE and other interior offices have implemented 28 of the 38 recommendations we made since 2013, including all 16 of our recommendations on school facility safety and construction. However, additional work is needed to address the remaining 3 criteria for removal from GAO's high-risk list. These include building staff capacity for supporting and overseeing schools, monitoring corrective measures, and demonstrating sustained progress in resolving high-risk issues. Building staff capacity has been a challenge for BIE for over a decade. There are steps that BIE could take to help build staff capacity. These include fully implementing our recommendation to update the agency's strategic workforce plan, which expired in 2022. Similarly, monitoring has been a persistent challenge for BIE. For example, in 2024, we identified several key issues with BIE's oversight of the more than $900 million in federal COVID funds it provided to schools during the pandemic. We found that for BIE-operated schools, nearly half of COVID spending made with credit cards involved elevated risk transactions, such as transactions for gift cards. However, BIE did not provide evidence that it had investigated these transactions for fraud or misuse. As a result, we recommended that BIE monitor school credit card transactions for potential fraud and misuse. Further, BIE needs to demonstrate continued progress in resolving high-risk problems. In conclusion, BIE has taken steps in recent years to address problems highlighted in our work. However, challenges continue to re-emerge at BIE because of remaining management weaknesses. Focusing on resolving these underlying issues is essential for BIE to fulfill its mission of providing high-quality educational opportunities for American Indian students. Thank you. This concludes my statement.
I thank the witnesses for their testimony. The chair will now acknowledge members for 5 minutes for their questions. I'll start with the full chairman for the full committee, Mr. Westerman, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar, and thank you again to the witnesses. Ms. Sedney, in the March 2024 report, OIG noted the significant risk for BIE schools associated with ignoring deferred maintenance for extended periods of time. How does the lack of regular maintenance and repairs for BIE education facilities contribute to growth of the deferred maintenance backlog over time and the further deterioration of federal assets? Is this a linear deterioration, or does it kind of deteriorate exponentially?
Well, I think the answer is both. You know, as regular repairs aren't done, then those repairs get worse, and then they're more expensive, and the backlog grows. So it certainly, if things are not addressed in a timely manner, we'll see they will exponentially, or they could exponentially increase.
Can you go into detail about any maintenance-related hazards that pose immediate safety risk to students and staff that you may have found during your investigation?
We have identified serious health and safety risks. So when we go out to schools, we check to see the types of health and safety deficiencies that are currently identified there and whether or not they're outstanding. The deficiencies are categorized in a manner where the worst is catastrophic. So that means that, you know, it could basically cause a death of somebody. And then it's critical and significant. So we have identified those types of deficiencies during our work for BIE schools.
So what would be an example in those different categories, like where would structural deficiencies or mold or HVAC?
I know one
Fires.
item that we've seen several times is issues with the fire system, or a lack of an operable fire system or sprinkler system, basically fire hazards that exist at some
Would that
schools.
be the highest level of?
Yes, that could be the highest level. So an example of that is we did a series of inspections of Pine Hill School, first, I believe, in 2016, and then we did follow-up. And over the years, that school did have fire issues where they did not have an operable fire alarm system.
Do emergency protocols exist for handling maintenance issues that impact student safety?
We also look at that issue when we do our school inspections, and some schools have them and some schools do not.
Do you know if there are any schools that are in risk of closure due to safety or maintenance issues?
I don't know that right now, but I can certainly get back to you with that information.
So does BIE currently have the ability to ensure that its facility management system accurately reflects the status of maintenance work orders?
Unfortunately, during the course of all of the work we've done over the past 10 years, we've found that the Maximo system, which is the deferred maintenance and repair, it's not accurate. We find work orders that are open that should be closed, and ones that are closed that should be open. So at this point, I think it would be tough to accurately estimate.
Did you observe any programs or systems that are being used to more accurately track work orders?
We have not done that analysis, but that would be something that we could talk to your staff about conducting in the future.
All right, thank you again. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I now, do you know?
I can wait till the end.
You want to do it? Okay, we're going to go a little out of order here. Just Mr. Wahlberg, the gentleman from Michigan, is recognized for his 5 minutes. He's got to go to the next committee meeting.
Thank you for your deference there, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to wave on. And I want to also thank the panel for being here today. As chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee, I'm concerned about the health and safety-related problems associated with BIE facilities. And as we know, BIE school facility problems have been around for years, as has been mentioned over and over again. Ms. Sedney, have you seen any meaningful progress by BIE in implementing solutions to unusable boilers, asbestos, and mold problems, and weakness in structures of school buildings?
I would say we have seen some improvements. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we've made 62 recommendations in the last 10 years, and about half of them have been implemented. So there is some progress. So a notable example is during our recent school inspections, where we're really focusing on specific schools, and we've noticed that BIE is taking our findings seriously at those schools and making concerted efforts to remedy the solutions. My team went to Havasupai Elementary School and identified a tree that was dangerously hanging over a kindergarten building and a playground, so much so that those facilities couldn't be used by the children. Within 6 weeks of our review, the tree was removed, and I'm happy to report that as of today, the children occupy that building and can play on that playground.
We'll take them as we get them, right? The victories. In your opinion, what is the best solution to systemic weaknesses in BIE's management of school facilities?
As I just mentioned, we have lots of open recommendations. I would put them into two buckets. I think implementing those recommendations would make the data more accurate. So the first bucket would be addressing those outstanding health and safety issues. Obviously, we want to keep our children and our staff safe at the schools. And the second bucket is cleaning up Maximo and making sure that the information in it is consistent. One issue that we've noticed at a lot of the schools is that the BIE maintenance staff at the school doesn't actually have access to the Maximo system. And since they don't have access to the system, they're not able to put in information or keep it up to date. So that's certainly something that I think would improve the data.
Okay, out of sight, out of mind. Thank you. We keep hearing over and over that the same BIE problems repeat themselves year after year. For example, problems with BIE's oversight of deferred maintenance and BIE's lack of meaningful oversight of school spending keeps recurring. Ms. Emery-Arras, would you talk about the specific management weaknesses that are causing these problems to persist?
Happy to. BIE is on GAO's high-risk list because of those systemic management weaknesses, and there are 3 key ones that remain. They need to address capacity. Do they have the right people with the right skills in the right place to do the work? They need to make sure that they're effectively monitoring programs, and they need to demonstrate progress. And until they do that, they will continue to have issues appear time and time again.
Okay. Thank you. Your testimony notes that back in 2020, GAO reported that BIE schools did not provide or could not account for more than 1/3 of special education service time required for students with disabilities. GAO also found BIE provided limited monitoring and limited technical assistance to help schools comply with special education requirements. Would you discuss in a little more detail GAO's findings?
Certainly. We found, looking at service logs, that 38% of special education time that was owed to students was either not provided or could not be accounted for. So this was time that was required on their IEPs, and it just disappeared. And there were instances at schools where some students didn't receive any special education services at all. This was very concerning for us, and what we found was that the BIE field staff didn't have the training and knowledge to effectively oversee the provision of special education services at schools.
I see my time will expire before I finish my next question, so if I can submit that and have the answer given in writing, I would appreciate that.
We'd appreciate it, Chairman. Gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Wilbur, is recognized for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to just give a special welcome to all of our tribal members who have traveled here to be with us today. Your voices are so valuable, and I've been able to spend a lot of times with the Southern Utes and the Ute Mountain Utes in Colorado, and now we have Congressman Jeff Hurd, who is chairman of the Indian and Insular Affairs Committee, Subcommittee, and hopefully we'll be welcoming you all for many hearings. We certainly cherish your rich heritage and want to uphold your sovereignty and work with you at every level. It is always such an honor to have conversations where we are working as a unit to solve problems, and for your communities who are certainly a big part of this nation's history. So with our witnesses here, I'm certainly excited also to delve into the challenges faced by BIE schools and push for more accountability and better resource allocation to ensure safe learning environments for our Native American students. Ms. Emery-Arras, Arras? I want to say that correctly. Arras, yes ma'am, thank you. And in your testimony, you mentioned that the Government Accountability Office found nearly half of COVID spending that was made with purchase of cards at the Bureau involved transactions at elevated risk for fraud and misuse. And I believe you mentioned also that $13.8 million in unallowable spending at 24 schools, and one school that was transferred, that transferred $1.2 million of federal funds to an offshore account. What recommendations would you make for GAO, or what recommendations have been made to the Bureau?
We've made multiple recommendations over the years to tighten controls over school spending, and you're right, we are very concerned about the credit card purchases that were flagged for risk, but then never investigated. There were purchases involving PayPal, Venmo, $2,000 in gift cards at an electronics store, you name it, and those were flagged as risky, but no one no one checked to see what was going on. We have recommendations to BIE to actually use existing software that it has to investigate those charges and determine whether they are in fact fraudulent.
Yes, so I mean, obviously with this improper use of federal funds, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And I think that you would agree that that money could have been better spent on outdated facilities, teacher shortages, safety concerns, and inadequate infrastructure impacting tribal controlled schools. Is that correct?
We believe that the federal funds need to be safeguarded from fraud and misuse.
Yes, ma'am. And does GAO plan to work with the Department of Government Efficiency to ensure taxpayer dollars are spent properly at BIE?
We work with every new administration to share information on the programs and operations of the federal government, and we will do the same this time.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Sedney, BIE's mission statement clearly states that the Bureau's goal is to provide quality education opportunities from early childhood through life in accordance with the tribe's needs for cultural and economic well-being. However, several schools are in extreme states of despair, as you're probably going to hear and speak of a lot during your panel time, due to leaking roofs and walls, mold, and signs of asbestos. How are students able to receive a quality education in these conditions?
So we have not looked specifically about how education has been impacted, on the students as a result of these conditions, but I think it's fair to say that we all recognize that the students aren't going to have a good education if they're in these facilities, and that's exactly why we prioritized this work for the last 10 years.
Yes, and I think test scores would show that there is some sort of impact, and maybe there's a correlation there. I certainly would be distracted if there were leaky roofs in a room. I get distracted when our committee rooms are too cold. Do you think that this is providing an opportunity for our tribal members to explore school choice and have funding go directly towards the parents so they have those resources and are able to choose where their child goes to school and receives their education?
We haven't done an analysis of that issue yet, but we would be happy to talk to your staff about how we could help or provide any additional information about that.
Yes, just with some of our members here that I've spoke with, I think school choice would be valuable to them, and certainly having those resources follow the student. Thank you.
The gentleman yields.
Yes.
You wanna go?
No, I think.
Okay. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started into my question, I just want to recognize the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians here. That's probably the closest tribal group that I have to my district. I don't have any tribal land in my district. But in talking with them, I know they're in a different tier from a lot of the BIE that we're talking about today. They're in the 638 section. And I would encourage you, anybody, I go through Cherokee all the time. You want to see a model of a school system that works and works well, they are it. They have a lot more control over their school system, though, and they're very proud to implement their culture and their language and get kids energized into learning. And it's because they have local control over a lot of local control over their school system. But as far as questioning, Ms. Sedney, I want to follow up on some things that Chairman Westerman's line of questioning that he was going through. I mean, you were answering about fire hazards and sprinkler systems not in there, not even having fire alarms, if I understood that right. Has BIE implemented a monitoring process to assess the status of these closed or so-called closed deferred maintenance orders in the facilities management system that have been addressed? Any monitoring system?
We actually have an outstanding recommendation that speaks just to that they should have a monitoring system to keep an eye on that.
So is that one that they've not addressed either?
That one's unimplemented at this time. Yes.
So no, wait a minute, let's get this right. So you ask them to put in a monitoring system to check the deferred maintenance that was not being maintained, and they haven't even set up a monitoring system yet?
We actually work with them. I have a team that does recommendation follow-up, and they meet with BIA and BIE on a monthly basis to talk through all of the open recommendations, and that is one that is still open.
Well, I'm gonna ask you, this is probably so in your view, is BIE's ability to manage deferred maintenance and repairs improved since the OIG review?
I would say they still face challenges, I mean, because of the data issues that we see and out.
I think you're being extremely generously nice, but, okay. Could you describe your working relationship with BIE when you've been conducting these oversight activities?
Sure. I think that's actually a positive story. So we issued our first Condition of Indian Schools report in 2000, so like 24, 25 years ago. And at that time, BIE didn't even respond to our report. We had 21 recommendations, got 0 response. Now we have a very good relationship, especially in the last 2 years. They are extremely responsive. As I just mentioned, my team meets with their team on a monthly basis to go through all of the recommendations, and we do see that they're making efforts to implement many of them.
Well, what can we do as a committee here to help even further that oversight and that relationship?
I keep saying recommendations, but I think it comes back to those. We have many outstanding ones, as does, I'm sure, my counterpart here, that I think would really help BIE to manage this issue if they implemented those recommendations.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I'm through question, but I want to just say, you know, the other side of the aisle, the only thing they could say was throw more money and more money and more money at it. And I think it's evident just by President Trump and DOGE and what you're seeing. This is nothing other than just the same old federal bureaucracies out there that are out of control, that don't answer to anybody, that are wasting our money, because you've got recommendations that weren't even addressed, recommendations that were claimed addressed, fixed, but really weren't. People buying gift cards and wasting money. Why would you put more money to that when you don't have any money? You got a management problem over there. You've got a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse going on with BIE that needs to be addressed. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Collins from Georgia. I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Andy Biggs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, first of all, to the tribal leaders and tribal members who are here today. We appreciate you being here. I'm informing you I wanted to be here for the second panel, but I have to be on the floor in about 15 or 20 minutes, so I will miss the second panel, and I have regrets about that. But thank you to our witnesses on this panel. So first of all, Ms. Sedney, this is for you. When you have so many repair orders and other orders that are open, closed, falsified, how do you tell what the exact amount of the actual backlog really would require? Because we don't know. I mean, do we?
Yes, I would probably question the backlog estimates that are there now, just because of the work that my team has performed in terms of looking, digging into the details of the work order system and finding so many that were either, open that should be closed or closed that should be open. As I mentioned earlier, we issued a management advisory just this week that discusses a contractor that BIE hired who closed thousands of work orders that shouldn't have been closed. And they close them based on...
I hope that particular contractor loses their ability to contract, right? I mean, that would be a normal remedy, right? But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to ask you a couple other questions before we go to Ms. Emery-Arras. This question is, I want to make sure, because when I was reading your report, in the last 5 years, you have made over 1,300, almost 1,400 recommendations to BOI, right? Or BOE, right? Am I wrong?
We have made lots of recommendations to BIE, yes, about this topic, yes.
Yeah, and your report says 1,374. Does that sound right?
It sounds a little high, but...
That's a heck of a lot of recommendations for 5 years. That's what I would just say. So it speaks to this notion that there is so much that has to be repaired within the echelons of the system itself that leaves me aghast, quite frankly. And if I also understand both of you look through the reports, the allocation per student is about $6,900 per pupil. Is that right? Federal dollars?
I don't have that estimate, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We can get back to you on that.
Yeah, it's in, I believe it's in your report, so please double check on that. I would like to know if that's the case.
Absolutely.
And then I would like to know if that folded into that 6,900 per pupil, how is that allocated for construction maintenance, those types of things. Then I want to go to you, Ms. Emery-Arras. Studies are pretty clear that bad facilities, leaky, dangerous facilities that impair health and safety actually are inclined to actually promote the need for special education and IEPs. Are you familiar with those?
I am not, sir.
Well, they are there, and you mentioned that roughly 38% of time for special ed services just disappeared. Yeah. And this is, while we're talking a physical plant backlog that needs to be repaired, we also need to be acknowledging that the students themselves, we need to find out what's going on with those students, especially those who have an IEP or something like that.
Correct. We were very concerned that these are students that had recommended special education time that they were not receiving. And in some cases, it was clear it was just never provided. In other cases, nobody knew. There was no documentation whatsoever, and it just disappeared. And that's just not acceptable. These are students that are vulnerable, that need assistance in order to learn, and they were not getting the help that they needed.
And so who has charge to actually follow up and assess whether these students are receiving the services they're supposed to receive?
It's a great question. The BIE field office staff were responsible for annually checking on the provision of special ed services. However, senior BIE officials told us that the very staff that were responsible for checking didn't have the training to do that. So you had people who didn't necessarily have the expertise being charged with doing those annual inspections.
Yeah, that's problematic for sure. And then I'm just going to ask you one last question real fast. What happened? You said roughly half of the COVID-19 spending was misused, disappeared. Have we found the people who have misused and abused that money? How much was that in dollar amounts? Because you said half, and I wondered what the actual dollar amount was. And thank you. And I'll yield back and let her, if possible, to answer the question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. The quick answer is that $7.1 million was flagged as risky. We don't know what happened to it, and we don't know if it was in fact fraudulent because BIE never checked.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wow. I think the gentleman from Arizona, the gentleman from South Dakota is Mr. Dusty, and he's going to ask his 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I want to start with a thank you. I have been asking for this hearing. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I think you all get the sense of how engaged members are on this. It really matters. I've got 3 BIE operated schools in South Dakota, 19 tribally controlled, and part of the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I have been to these schools, I have talked to the tribal educators, and every single time, the message, the passionate message from them is the same. These schools are underfunded, they are mismanaged, there are problems from one end of the situation to the other. And you can tell they care about these kids, and we're failing these kids. And so I want to thank you for elevating this issue so we can figure out a way to do better. And Ms. Sedney, in response to questioning from Mr. Biggs, indicated that, yeah, we should maybe not have the highest level of confidence on the deferred backlog amount because there are work orders that we don't have a lot of confidence in. What about the facilities condition index? Should we have confidence in that?
The facilities condition index is derived from the information in Maximo. So that is one concern that we noted in our reports, that the facility condition index may be incorrect. We first talked about this issue back in 2016, where we actually visited schools in the 3 different categories. So they're categorized, as good, fair, or poor, and we found that they were not categorized correctly. So a school that was rated purportedly rated good was not, in fact, in good condition. We're continuing to see those types of problems with the FCI index.
And of course, poor data out means, poor data in means poor data out, and there is an incredibly scarce pot of dollars. We've got 4 schools in South Dakota that are on the replacement list, and we want to make sure that they're properly prioritized. I've been there. They are absolutely in need of replacement. So we want a data system that we can count on. You mentioned 2016. I have been touched by the number of times in your testimony you've talked about the consistent engagement, the multi-year engagement in this broader BIE system, recommendations that were provided 5 years ago, 10 years ago. In general, how do you assess the responsiveness, the urgency of BIE to your recommendations?
I would say they are responsive. They are responding to our reports. They are making some progress in implementing our recommendations. However, as I mentioned, half of them remain unimplemented, some of them from 10 years ago.
Do we have a sense of what proportion are as of yet not addressed?
See, half of them are unaddressed.
Half, yes.
Half, right. And some of those were new. Some of those, we just issued a report on Monday where we had 3 recommendations. So very brand new. But then, we have ones that are outstanding for 10 years. Not very many, but we are, again, working with BIE on a daily or monthly basis to make sure that they're making progress.
So, ma'am, Ms. Emery-Arras, again, Mr. Biggs asked about the 1/2 of COVID dollars that may have been misspent at risk of fraud, waste, abuse. What is Congress to do with that information?
I think having a hearing like you are today is helpful in terms of putting pressure on the department to implement our recommendation. They have the software to use to actually investigate those transactions. They just haven't done so. And so I think paying attention to this issue and highlighting it today is critical.
So what would, it honestly, it boggles the mind. I'm not blind to the realities of the world. I understand how many COVID era dollars were misspent, and yet I will still acknowledge to being blown away by the estimate of half in this instance. What would cause those dollars, what causes those to be flagged as a problem?
The software system would flag things that seem suspicious. For example, there's a maximum purchase limit of traditionally $10,000. So the idea is you're not supposed to have a more than $10,000 purchase, but sometimes people will get around that by having 2 $6,000 purchases or what have you. So having like smaller amounts to go over the threshold within a short period of time is a flag, because it looks like you're trying to get around it. So that's game playing. Some of those may indeed be legitimate purchases. Some may actually be fraudulent, and so deeper investigation is necessary to figure it out. Well, Ms. Chair, before I yield, I would just mention we got to do better by these kids. And Mr. Biggs talked about accountability. The contractors that insanely close these work orders without doing the work, yes, they should be held accountable. And then those who used these COVID-era funds fraudulently also need to be held accountable. That gives us the best opportunity of making sure that the men and women in the system in the future understand that they have to follow the rules and we have to do right by these students. Thank you, sir. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Johnson from South Dakota. I got to tell you, I love the idea about those COVID funds. I wonder where they came from.
Yeah.
Then I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Eli Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you to the panelists for coming today, and thank you for all the guests for coming out today. I represent 14 tribes in Arizona, and I hear countless stories of schools feeling completely left behind and getting zero help from BIE. I've seen the pictures of dilapidated school buildings and deeply concerning health and safety hazards. I think it's fair to say they are sick and tired of BIE making promises they will not keep, and they want accountability. Ms. Sedney, your office released a report a few months ago on Havasupai Elementary School in my district as part of a new initiative to conduct safety and health inspections at tribal schools. Your findings were troubling. Unreliable heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, a roof in poor condition, and no comprehensive emergency management program, security plan, or emergency drills. Ms. Sedney, what is BIE's role supposed to be in making sure that problems you've identified are addressed?
BIE should be implementing the recommendations that we have, and at Havasupai, I will say that we are working towards they're working towards implementing some of those recommendations. At that school, I believe we made 12 recommendations, and they have implemented 2, and 10 are still outstanding.
Thank you. Are the problems you've identified new, or has Havasupai struggled with those issues for a long time?
This was the first time we have, inspected Havasupai in recent history, so I can't speak to how long some of those issues have occurred, but, from what they told us, they have been issues for a while.
Why does it take the DOI Inspector General writing a long report on BIE's failures in order for BIE to be alerted to longstanding issues at tribal schools?
I can't speak to why or why not they have, whether they've known about these issues. So,
Ms. Sedney, do you think BIE can be trusted to implement the recommendations your office made back in October to help Havasupai Elementary?
I will say that they are working with my staff on a monthly basis to make progress on implementing those recommendations.
What about you, Ms. Emery-Arras? Considering BIE has had programs on GAO's high-risk list for years, do you think they can be trusted to properly help these schools?
They have definitely shown leadership commitment and have done a lot to implement GAO's recommendations. That said, what's been discussed here is very concerning.
Ms. Emery-Arras, did you say that you had had an investigation into school spending?
Yes, sir.
What did you find?
We found a variety of things, and actually we've been looking at school spending for a number of years at BIE and have had repeated findings ranging from staff who are responsible for overseeing school spending not knowing how to do that work, to more recently concerns with them not doing appropriate controls to ensure against fraud and abuse. We think that more needs to be done with school spending, and we have multiple recommendations to address that.
Ma'am, did you say in your testimony that of the $900 billion given to BIE during COVID, you found that close to half of it could have been used for fraud, waste, and abuse?
Close to half of the money that was spent on credit card transactions, which is a lower amount than that.
Okay, how much money did you find was spent on gift cards and credit cards?
I don't know the exact number for that piece, but I would say that 7.1 million was flagged as risky, which would be for gift cards, PayPal, Venmo, multiple purchases, et cetera. And those risky transactions were just never investigated.
Did you say that you found one instance where 1.2 million in federal funds was transferred to an offshore account?
That is true from our earlier work. It went away and it never came back.
So was anybody ever arrested or held accountable for that?
Not to our knowledge.
One of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I believe it was Mr. Huffman, said that these schools are underfunded. That may be very well true, but given some of the testimony that we've heard in this hearing today, many taxpayers are concerned that if we were to give BIE more money, there would be more fraud, waste, and abuse, and nobody held accountable. Would you agree with that assessment, ma'am?
Although I can't comment on appropriation levels, I can say that more needs to be done to guard against fraud and abuse and safeguard taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Crane, for his testimony. Now I'm going to go to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Dexter, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to really underline what I'm hearing is the chronic underfunding is absolutely preventing us from being able to address deferred maintenance, whether it's for the Massimo system or other things. It sounds like that's pretty clear. But I want to underscore that this undermines our overall obligations to our tribes. And I think that that is something that we all here are agreeing on. So, Ms. Emery-Arras, to what extent is BIE's ability to fulfill its mission constrained by limited funding and staff capacity?
We have heard from BIE officials that funding constraints are certainly an issue for them. They've also mentioned challenges with federal hiring in terms of a long and complex bureaucratic process. That said, those factors are outside of BIE's direct control. There are factors within its control that it can do to improve its capacity. We've recommended that they update their strategic plan, which expired in '22, to make sure that they've got people aligned with their highest priority needs, and they have yet to do that.
And having run strategic plans, it takes a lot of people and a lot of time to do that, so that makes sense to me. And not excusing it, but I understand the time investment. And to follow up on that, to what extent is BIE's ability to accurately track the maintenance backlog affected by limited funding and staff capacity? Ms. Emery-Arras.
I wouldn't be able to speak to that. I just know that for quite some time, they've had issues with monitoring the accuracy and completeness of their deferred maintenance data. I was looking back in our earlier work, and it sounds almost identical to the IG's recent work back in 2015, mind you, with the previous system, right? This is before the current facility system. It was the same thing. The agency was not routinely monitoring the data to make sure it was accurate and complete. School officials didn't always have access to the system, nor do they have the training and expertise to enter information.
Okay. And I'm going to turn to Ms. Sedney. Same questions to you. I think you've addressed this to a large degree, so just high-level points that you would want us to really understand from your perspective to these investment.
Sure. We haven't done a high-level independent analysis of BIE staffing, but I would say in all of our work over the past few years, BIE officials, like on the ground at the schools, have said that staffing, creates a problem for them to be able to handle the deferred maintenance. We've also noted that there are vacancies. We can see, for example, at Havasupai, there's a 53% vacancy rate at that school, or at least there was at the time of our review. So that would certainly impact their ability to fix things.
Sure. Okay. And I just want to switch now to recommendations that the GAO and IG have been making and effectively, to some degree, implementing, and that the BIE, it sounds like, has made some progress in that regard, despite ongoing resource and capacity issues. So I think understanding that they're working with short staff, they're still making progress, which is laudable. So Ms. Sedney, can you point to cases where your recommendations that you've made, and we understand that only half have been implemented or so, where they have led to measurable improvements?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I think just having our teams on the ground highlights issues and makes, causes action by BIE. I mentioned the tree over the kindergarten at Havasupai, so of course we were very happy to see that, but also smaller adjustments that were made by giving people access to the facility management system. As I mentioned, if people don't have access at the school, then they're going to have to rely on somebody from BIE that might be, hours away or states away. So then that causes these problems. So we have seen at some of the schools that we went to that they've given access to people that need it.
Great. And Ms. Emery-Arras, knowing that I've got 40 seconds left, there are currently 10 recommendations from prior GAO reports that BIE has not yet implemented. How do you believe implementing these recommendations will help BIE support better and better support and monitor schools?
Implementing the recommendations will help safeguard funds in terms of taxpayer dollars. It will also help ensure that students receive special education services, and that is critical for this population.
Very good. With my last few seconds, Mr. Chair, I just want to acknowledge that we are spending, I'm told, $6,900 on average per student annually in the BIE programs versus the average in U.S. public schools is about $15,000 to $16,000 per student, and this is despite higher socioeconomic needs. So I think we are disproportionately underinvesting in these students. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the ranking member. Now, I'm going to be a little bit different with my line of questions, okay? So, who usually with the tribes does a better job of dialoguing with the tribes? State government, local government, or the federal government? Ms. Sedney?
We haven't looked at that issue. We haven't done an analysis there, but I would be happy to talk to you or your staff about looking into that.
Yeah, how about you, Ms. Emery-Arras?
We would also be happy to talk with your staff about that issue.
Yeah, so I talk all about politics are always best local, okay? And so I would be looking at probably the state or the local governments. Now, I've lived with tribes my whole life. And so I've seen a lot of opportunities where we could do something better, and we got to do something better. So now I'm going to move to the funding part, okay? So if you have a budget and you have to cut something, let's just say it's waste and fraud. Let's say you find out that there's some money actually being paid to a subscription or a, let's just say it's an entity out there. You can also make that cut, but you can also move it to a different area, can you not? Would that be smart to do, Mrs. Sedney? Redirect that money?
It sounds like that's something that could be done, yes.
How about you, Ms. Harris?
I hear where you're going.
Okay. See, I'm not restricting myself. I know there's a semantics here about cutting, but I want cutting the bad stuff out and redirect it. You know, there's something about America first, and that's tribal first. That's what I see. Because it's all about us. You can't help anybody else. You can't help ourselves. And these are the original Americans. So why can't we take some of the stuff we see and redirect it? And then why don't we, if Congress, if we're the problem, why don't we be the solution? So take it and divvy it out, and then we go out there for a field hearing and say, okay, here's what we want to do. We're coming back. And we help everybody get people that are qualified to build. We okay the building. And we can do this pretty fast, okay? And you go back out the second year, we can do this year, pick some projects, a smaller program, middle school, and even Haskins University. And put them out there and say, okay, let's drive this. What time can we have this done? What can we do this? And go out there and see it. Because the light of accountability really makes this thing work. It really does. And I think that the tribal members have been put off so much that they don't know who to trust. I'll give you an example, okay? Indian water settlements, very, very important, okay? But states have the water. So it's a federal interaction with the tribes to take some of the state's water, okay? There's a lot of complications in this thing. So I actually had a tribe that was told by an attorney that we can do this by administrative law. I don't know where this attorney got their information, but the last thing I looked at is it has to go through Congress, okay? And I had to be the bad guy, saying, listen, we're not going to do this because you threw it at me at the last moment. We didn't have a chance to look at all the stuff. But then I came back and I said, okay, I'm happy to help you. I'm going to be hard on you because we're going to get these numbers where we can make this work, okay? I'm the first of 10 kids. I know what hand-me-ups are all about. If you've seen my brothers, you'll understand. They're big, okay? So it was about hand-me-ups. But I know where a dollar goes. I'm also in construction. And you can't tell me that there's not enough contractors out there who are Native American who don't do a great job. In fact, they all did my house outside of Flagstaff. So I think there's a way around this. I just look at it in a different lens, a different continuity. And so I would challenge you both and everybody else in the audience, if you got an idea, why not share it? Because we might just get it done. I want to thank the two witnesses for coming this day, and we look forward to your comments. We'll excuse that group, and then we're going to take a couple minutes just while the second tier will come back out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to introduce Chairman Valesquez from my district. We just got a chance to meet in my office, and he has several schools on his reservation that fall under BIE, and so I think he's a great witness. I thank you, sir, for traveling out here, and I look forward to your testimony.
Mr. Crane. Now I'm going to go to Representative Dusty Johnson from South Dakota to introduce the second witness, Ms. Cecilia Fire Thunder.
Well, Mr. Chairman, when you think about legendary home run hitters, you can't help but think about Babe Ruth. And when you think about legendary scorers, you can't help but think about Michael Jordan. And when you think about legendary tribal education leaders, you cannot help but think about Cecilia Fire Thunder. I've known this woman a long time. She is a force of nature. Do not get on her bad side, Mr. Chairman, because she is a fierce advocate for what has to be done for these children. It is about the future. And she has been a leader on tribal council as the president of the Oglala. She's just been a remarkable person who's taught me so much, and she is indefatigable, Mr. Chairman, for 9 years. She came to Congress and told us that these tribal school employees need to have access to the federal employee health benefits program, and she was told no, 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 and then she got a yes, because nobody tells the legend Cecilia Fire Thunder no for very long. Ma'am, it is an honor to have you here, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I'd also like to do the rest of the panel. Mr. Jason Dropik, the Executive Director of National Indian Education Association, Washington, D.C., and Ms. Shawna Becenti, who sees some of my people over there in Farmington. She's the head school, Navajo Preparatory School of Farmington, New Mexico. Now let's just go through the rules real quick. Just to remind you, all your statements are going to be in the record, okay? So you got 5 minutes. As soon as you see that little green light go on, start talking. And when you start seeing that yellow, start slowing down, maybe catch up, and in red, stop, okay? And then we'll start a bunch of rounds of questions, okay? So we're going to start with Mr. Valesquez for his 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gozar and Ranking Member Dexter, and also several of the United States Congress colleagues that are in here. Thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of the White Mountain Apache tribe located on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation in the state of Arizona. I am Kasey Valesquez, Tribal Chairman, a former teacher, school counselor, acting principal, ardent supporter of education, dean of students for the White Mountain Apache youth, and all Apache Native Americans in terms of a strong supporter. I am here to address the critical need for additional funding to support the Breathing and Education schools on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. Funding is needed, as I heard earlier, to address the dilapidated state of BIE schools, including for maintenance and repairs, teacher housing, school security measures, critical technology updates, and desperately needed improvements to student dormitories. Our schools continue to do what they can do with what they have, but outdated infrastructures and technology coupled with inadequate housing and resources for staff have resulted in high turnover and disrupted operations. Our students need and deserve better, and I hope you will help us deliver on the tremendous promise these young people possesses. The BIE schools on the Fort Apache Reservation are operating in buildings with failing infrastructure, which poses safety hazards and disrupts student learning. We face regular outages due to the load on our outdated electrical systems, which results in spoiled food, lack of computers, limited access to broadband, forcing the schools to occasionally close. During these power outages, we often use kerosene and take other drastic measures to stay warm during the winter. When carbon monoxide levels are exceeded, our children must be sent home. In addition, staff housing on the reservation is very limited and suffers the same deferred maintenance issues on the school buildings. This lack of Adequate and affordable housing for staff has made it difficult to attract and retain qualified teachers. Due to our remote locations, teachers often have to travel great distance from towns outside the reservation where house cost far exceeds what BIE can pay them. Most public schools in the United States are equipped with school resource officers and have locked doors. Our schools have open campuses, meaning anyone can walk onto school grounds and enter the buildings. Insufficient security systems and a lack of available police officers that could readily respond and staff volunteers are insufficient at this time. God forbid, if an active shooter threat were to occur, officers might have to travel from many miles away to respond due to lack of law enforcement services. To address these issues impacting our BIE schools, White Mountain Apache Tribe is requesting additional funding. Specifically, the tribe requests immediate fundings to address critical maintenance and repair issues in the BIE schools on the Fort Apache Reservation. Secure quality teacher housing on our reservation to attract and retain qualified teachers. Implement adequate security measures, including outside lighting, security cameras, train personnel to protect student safety, acquire modern technology, infrastructure, and devices to provide students with access to digital learning opportunities and the ability to compete with their peers. Renovate and expand residential services, dormitories to provide safe, comfortable living spaces for at-risk students. In conclusion, the BIE schools plays a vital role in the education of children on the Fort Apache Reservation, but their current condition does not foster academic or personal services or success. By providing this necessary funding, we can ensure that our students have access to quality education and can grow up to lead successful, independent lives. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Valesquez. The chair now recognizes Ms. Fire Thunder. I can hardly wait for 5 minutes.
Chairman Gosar, Ranking Member Dexter, and members of the subcommittee. Well, Pila, that means thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the state of Bureau Indian Education Schools. My name is Cecilia Fire Thunder, and I serve as the president of the Oglala Lakota Nation Education Coalition on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I am also the president of the Little Wound School Board in Kyle, South Dakota, and I'm a recent member of the board of directors for Oglala Lakota College, which I helped build. I will highlight key points of my testimony, and in a written testimony, you have it. Oglala Lakota Nation Education Coalition represents the Oglala Sioux Tribe, 6 tribally controlled schools. But today we stand in solidarity with the other 131 tribal controlled schools that are locally controlled in our fight for quality Indian education. It's an honor for me to have with me today 5 of those schools from the Pine Ridge Reservation accompanying me, and 1 school from the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. Stand up, ladies. And so these, I want this committee to know, yes. And gentlemen, and this committee, education, is working. 6 of our tribal schools on a Pine Ridge Reservation are all tribal members, superintendents and principals. All of our business managers are tribal members. So in other words, education has worked. So our leadership in our schools and our superintendents and teachers are all tribal members. I urge Congress to uphold the legal and moral obligation that sustain the federal government's treaty and trust responsibility. The relationship between tribal nations and the federal government is based on sovereignty and political status, not race. Programs for tribal nations are distinct from diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. When Congress acts, whether through funding or legislation, it does so under its unique obligation towards tribal nations and their citizens. This duty is firmly established under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution. The 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie with the Great Sioux Nation. And there are other 300 and other ratified treaties, which are the supreme law of the land. In exchange for millions of acres of tribal land and resources, including gold, timber, oil, and natural gas, these treaties promise protection, recognition of tribal sovereignty, and essential services, including education for Indian children. We ask Congress to meet these commitments by fulfilling the federal trust responsibility to tribal education. Today, we come here with a tremendous need to repair and replace our facilities. The Bureau of Indian Education faces a 1 million deferred maintenance backlog and a 6.7 million backlog in school replacement and construction. However, Congress only appropriates $116 million annually. Today, we also want your committee to really take a hard look at what other issues that need to be addressed. And gentlemen, one of the areas is that the Department of Interior is the one that handles and manages school construction. Today, we have over time learned that the place that the problem is within the DFMW, under the Bureau, under the Department of Interior. We can raise money, but then it takes time, forever, it seems like, and perhaps never, to get our schools repaired and replaced. Operation and maintenance funding has never been fully provided. And then I also want to respectfully request, and in listening to the two ladies before us, that the Bureau, the Department of Interior, has to have a really good work group to take a hard look at the process that it takes to begin to plan and repair and replace our tribal schools. So in conclusion, I'd like to say, well, Pilar, thank you so much. We have everything in writing, and this 5 minutes goes by very fast. Thank you, Dusty, for introducing me, and thank you for all your work in helping our schools on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Well, Pilar, thank you.
I thank you, Mrs. Fire Thunder. That's a fabulous conversation. The next I'm going to recognize Mr. Dropik for his 5 minutes.
Chairman, ranking member, and esteemed members of the committee, Buju, Miigwech, Minogizhigad, Babami Benes Indigenakaz, Minawaki Dunjaba. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Dropik, and I am the Executive Director of the National Indian Education Association. Prior to serving in this role, I did serve in public, private, choice education for over 20 years, and I'm very thankful and honored to be able to be here with all of you. On behalf of the students, educators, and tribal nations that NIA serves, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on the severe maintenance, repair, and modernization challenges facing the Bureau of Indian Education. With an emphasis on deferred maintenance backlogs, funding constraints, and systemic inefficiencies. For far too long, Native students have attended schools in unsafe, deteriorating facilities, despite the federal government's responsibility to Native education as guaranteed by treaties, the U.S. Constitution, and legal precedents. Currently, about 45,000 Native students across 23 states attend BIE-funded schools. While some of these schools are directly operated by the BIE, 131 out of the 183 are tribally controlled. Many of these schools are located in rural or remote communities, further complicating the task of maintaining safe and functional facilities. The Department of Interior has reported a deferred maintenance backlog of over $800 million, with estimates suggested that $6.7 billion, with a B, is needed to address these needs. While recent funding from the Great American Outdoors Act and annual appropriations are appreciated, they fall far short of the required amount. At the current rate, at least 66 schools remain in such poor conditions that immediate action is necessary to prevent further deterioration. We strongly urge Congress to increase funding for BIE school maintenance and ensure that BIE schools receive a dedicated portion of any reauthorization of GAOA. However, the funding issue is only part of the challenge. The Division of Facilities Management and Construction is the office in charge of construction, repair, and replacement for both the BIA and the BIE. DFMC's system for managing work orders and maintenance requests is currently very insufficient and outdated. The approval process involves around 15 steps and does not include clear definitions of deferred maintenance or emergency. This results in delays and depletes schools' already limited resources. Additionally, inadequate staffing, inconsistent training, and lack of transparency further impedes progress. streamlining approval processes, ensuring consistent staffing and training, offering proactive transparency to the schools, and implementing a centralized digital tracking system are crucial steps to improve these operations. We ask that Congress also direct a study on DFMC and BIE's maintenance workforce and mandate increased transparency. To make matters worse, the BIE receives construction funding based on annual appropriations, but that process is frequently interrupted or delayed. This instability leaves schools vulnerable to funding shortfalls, especially when the need for repairs is urgent. A potential solution is ensuring funding for Section 105L leases under the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. These leases or funding agreements allow tribes to take control of their school facilities and perform repairs and maintenance themselves, with payments based on fair market value of the facilities tribes build. This model promotes self-governance, reduces bureaucratic inefficiencies, and enhances accountability. However, this approach cannot reach its full potential unless Congress moves 105L leases payments to mandatory spending. By empowering tribal nations to take a more active role in the maintenance and modernization of their schools, we can allow for quicker, more effective responses to local needs. The federal government must respect tribal sovereignty. And I love the comment, America first should be tribal first. I'm going to steal that, just so you know. That's amazing. And so, Miigwech, thank you so much for that. But we have to continue to ensure that our educational facilities are tailored to the unique needs of Native students. By doing so, you also create the opportunity to promote economic self-sufficiency by creating local jobs and keeping resources within tribal communities. Additionally, providing non-discretionary funding for 105L leases for school facilities would reduce dependency on unreliable federal funding cycles and increase long-term sustainability. By supporting self-governance in the BIE and adequately funding maintenance improvements, Congress can help provide Native students with safe, modern schools while reducing unnecessary government bureaucracy and ensuring taxpayer dollars are spent more efficiently. Improving the learning environments for BIE schools is not just a matter of policy, it's a fiduciary obligation under federal trust and treaty responsibilities. With the right investment, better management, and support for self-governance, we can ensure that Native students have access to the education they deserve. Thank you so very much.
Thank the gentleman. Now we're going to go to Ms. Becenti for her 5 minutes. Good seeing you.
Yate, I'm chairman of the full committee, Bruce Westerman, Chairman Gassar, Ranking Member Dexter, and members of the House Subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to provide oral testimony regarding underfunded deferred maintenance of Bureau Indian Education school facilities. My name is Shawna Allison Becenti, and I'm a proud alumna and head of school of Navajo Preparatory School in Farmington, New Mexico. I am Zuni Red Streak running into water and born for Salt Clan. With me is Dr. Bernadette Goodluck Totachini, who is the president of our board. She's in the back. And as head of school, it is my responsibility to ensure the long-term sustainability and growth of our institution. Navajo Prep is a tribally controlled school funded by the Bureau of Indian Education. We were founded to be the Navajo Nation's college preparatory school, and we are an example of Indian self-determination. We serve 291 students in grades 9th through 12th who have an opportunity to earn an International Baccalaureate World Diploma. Our students represent different tribal nations from across the United States, and 65% of our students live on campus in residential homes. Navajo Prep's alumni represent the mission and vision of our school, Yidiscongo Natani, leaders now into the future. Our alumni success speaks for itself. Navajo Prep has sustained a high school graduation rate of 94%. 100% of our students are accepted into four-year college or universities, and it is reported 60% of our students graduate from college within 6 years. This significantly surpasses the national and state graduation rates for American Indian students. Our critical priority is sustaining the Diné or Navajo language, and it is vital our facilities support this priority. By 2040, it is estimated that 5% of Navajo people will speak our language. Schools have an obligation to address this language loss crisis. Navajo Prep's campus is over 100 years old. In 2007 and 2008, BAE funded and the Department of Facility Management and Construction at BAE completed selected renovations. In 2014, we submitted a work order to install HVAC systems in 4 of our residential homes. The HVAC project is crucial to the safety of our students as temperatures inside the building can often exceed 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This work order was appropriated in fiscal year 2021 Green Book and budgeted $3 million. In 2020, DFMC started the project and completed 20% designs which lacked architectural finishing, but they did not conduct tribal consultation, nor did they notify the Navajo Nation about the option to elect to complete the project through a 297 contract. By 2024, the project has remained incomplete, and the budget has now reduced to $2.5 million. In June of 2024, the Navajo Nation formally requested that Navajo Prep take over the project through Public Law 100-297. As of today, the project is stalled at 5 steps of 15 steps, while construction keeps inflating. We are still negotiating grant terms with BIE and have not received a release of funds. We recommend that the deferred maintenance approval and funding process be more streamlined. For example, the State of New Mexico Capital Outlay Grant Award System has a 2-step process which allowed Navajo Prep to construct a residential home in 1 year. Tribally controlled schools should always know where they are in the approval process and when they might expect next steps. We encourage BIE and DFMC to develop task force with tribally controlled schools and tribal leaders to rework this process. The final evaluation report of the Office of Inspector General highlights the presence of outdated and inaccurately maintained work orders, which interferes with data and budget forecasting. However, it's important to note that schools must keep work orders open in Maximo until funding has been received or reimbursed. Over 14,000 work orders were canceled simply based on the amount of time they've been in the system. This impacts our projects, as some of the deleted work orders have not been completed, funded, or reimbursed. We're reviewing which work orders were deleted to ensure ongoing operation of our institution. We recommend that rather than slowly focusing on closing work orders, BIE should address funding, disbursements, and communication with schools. We are asking for what it was promised for our students within our federal treaties. These treaties and trust responsibilities are to adequately fund construction and maintenance of appropriate, safe educational facilities so that our students are not left trying to meet 21st century expectations in 19th century buildings. Thank you.
I thank the gentlewoman. Now I'm going to go to questions on our side. It'll be Chairman from the full Workforce Committee, Mr. Wahlberg from Michigan. 5 minutes.
Well, Mr. Chair, I like your subcommittee. You're very kind. You're very kind to me. Yeah. Chairman Valesquez, you've served in the education sector in many capacities over the years. Former teacher, school counselor, principal, dean of students, and executive director of early childhood development. And you still have all your hair. I don't. In your testimony, you draw attention to the different kinds of challenges: basic school building maintenance, teacher housing, security concerns, lack of adequate technology, infrastructure, and student dormitories. If you were asked to pick the top 2 priorities from your list on which BIE should focus its time and attention, what would they be?
First and foremost, one would be infrastructures. Number 2 would be technology. Those would be the 2 things I'd be looking at from my reservation.
Why?
Why? When you look at the infrastructures on the reservation, we have 3 schools. One is run by Bureau of Indian Education, BIE, totally government run. We have 2 schools that are tribally controlled schools in the CBQ district, which is about an hour away from our capital. Then we have one right down about 5 minutes south of our capital there. Those buildings are fairly old. They're buildings that have been there a long time. When you take a look at the academic process of thinking, you know, we have our White River Unified School District that is run by the state of Arizona. We have one parochial school on our reservation. So a majority of the kids, they opt to go to the White River Unified School District, but CBQ, which is on the west end of our reservation, which is about an hour from our capital, a lot of our kids go there because that's where we talk about the White Mountain Apache language that is paramount. So they utilize the White Mountain Apache language. They use that. When it comes down to sports, they're readily involved in there. And when it comes down to practicing the cultures of the White Mountain Apache tribe, it's there too. So the hub is there. So that's basically one of the buildings that I see is the elementary school of CBQ that needs to be built, because I would rather see the community of CBQ, our kids, go to school there, get their education from K-12, graduate, and then move on to life. When it comes down to the Fort Apache Theodore Roosevelt School, that school is identified full of history. History meaning things that have happened there way before my time.
Okay.
But now that dormitory there sits, and it's paramount for our kids that go to school there, that come from lower socioeconomics, that come there, stay there throughout the weekend, and that's the only place that they see that's a hub of safety for them.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm constantly pushing it for them.
So it's a practical thing that in order to complete the education and continue it, you have to have this. I have to move on here quickly. I'd love to hear more. Let me go over to Ms. Becenti. As head of the Navajo Prep School and alumna, you've seen the value of residential education. Indeed, the data shows that since 2020, Navajo Prep has had a 94% or higher graduation rate and has had 100% of your 2024 graduates accepted into four-year colleges and universities. Would you share with us the one or two things with which you attribute the success of the school and its students?
First and foremost, it's living to our mission and vision of our school. And in '91, when it was established, we have held on to, we are in this to create leaders. Everything we do, from curriculum alignment to the way we build, to the way we design, to the way that we spend our money. Hence, we are a tribally controlled school. And so we ensure that we spend taxpayers' dollars appropriately. We go through audits, not only in our audits say that we are a high-performing school, also in that we have to compete with the local schools around us. We care about our teachers, and we care that we are redefining Indian education in this 21st century and redefining residential life for our children.
I thank you. I wish you the best. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his 5 minutes. The gentleman from Puerto Rico is recognized for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very nice room, right? It's formal, it's cool, comfortable. The chairs are certainly comfortable. The fact that this room is comfortable makes us work better, right? Makes us take our jobs more seriously, allow us to allocate more time to our work. Well, Congress does a good job of taking care of itself. It needs to do a better job of taking care of the people. And what we're seeing with BIE schools with regards to infrastructure is very saddening, because education is supposed to be a great equalizer in our country, supposed to be the base of support for equality of opportunity. So my questions for you related to the infrastructure challenges that you face, Mr. Dropik, what specific policy changes or funding increases would you recommend Congress to consider, especially in light of the upcoming reauthorization of the Great American Outdoors Act or the appropriations process?
Yeah, thanks for that. I would definitely say that as we look at appropriations and authorizations, we know that there's often stalls that happen and different types of agreements that can really impact communities, and that continues to compound. As we look at the the reauthorization of Act so that we can, the Great American Outdoors Act, increasing that percentage to BIE schools for infrastructure and construction from 5% to anything more than 5% would be a welcome opportunity and great opportunity for the school systems to be able to do the needs that they have for their people, so long as we can also increase the efficiency and change the systems and process and oversight that goes along with it. I don't disagree with those that have said that you can't throw more money into a system that's not working, so we need to get rid of the barriers that aren't working, and it's not the people's desire, it's not the school systems, it's not the tribal communities, it's the processes that keep them from getting what they need and continuing to make sure that we're able to see that, and we can then share those successes with other communities and other schools like the ones that we see here today. So those would be some of the ones that we would ask for. In addition, of course, obviously, to the opportunity for 105L leasing, we do believe that that is an opportunity and an additional strategy that could really look into control for tribes to address their maintenance issues. But once again, that can only happen if it's mandatory funding, because if banks don't know that that money is guaranteed, they're not going to issue it. And then we're going to be in the same issues, delaying, prolonging, and expanding costs in the long term.
And I think you would agree that it's unfair to deprive you of resources and then claim that you're not doing your job properly when you don't have the resources you need to do your job.
Yeah, I know I don't have a lot of time, but I think if you talk to yourselves about like how effective am I at tying my shoe, I think we'd all be pretty effective at that usually. I don't have shoelaces on my shoes, but I think I'm still pretty effective at it. Now imagine putting a hand behind your back and trying to tie your shoes one-handed. That's what we're trying to do to our systems. How can you blame the effectiveness when you haven't given them all the tools to be as effective as they can be?
Or it's as if they took away all my staff and then told me that I'm not doing my job properly.
Right, correct.
My second question is Ms. Becenti and Ms. Fire Thunder. I guess in the interest of time, I'll ask for very quick responses, but if you had access to additional funding, maintenance funding, what immediate repairs or upgrades would you prioritize?
Definitely our HVAC system that's in place, and we are currently demolishing a 1920s building and trying to create a performing arts and really giving our arts as in portables. That would be mine. Or I can say more. We also have drainage, other priorities.
Thank you very much. You know, I am deaf. I wear cochlear implants, so I have interpreters sitting here. And the priorities, well, for us, our priority is repair and replace our schools.
Okay. No, and I think HVAC, you know, I come from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is also a very hot place. And we have a similar issue with our schools. Many of them need a new HVAC system because we're facing the challenges of climate change. And, you know, I don't think Congress would operate without an HVAC system during the coldest days of winter or during the hottest days of summer, especially in Washington, D.C. Thank you. With that, I yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman. Now the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Lauren Boebert, is called up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you to our witnesses for being here. I thanked you while you were seated in the audience waiting to approach the table and speak with us. But I am just honored to sit here before you and hopefully get some real answers. The Indian students at BIE and tribally controlled elementary and secondary schools deserve a safe and healthy school environment to learn and grow. There's no doubt about that. Unfortunately, BIE and BIA have failed in that mission, leading to lower quality educational opportunities and resources for tribal students. What is the single biggest challenge each of you have had with BIE, and how we can work with the Trump administration to help all of you provide our Native American students with quality education? If we could quickly go down the line, if that's okay, starting with you, Mr. Valesquez.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that you know from our community that BIE is not the problem. BIE has only $5 million in construction authority. However, the Department of Interior's Division of Facilities, Maintenance, and Construction is responsible for major projects, including all other BIE construction. DFMC's inefficiency is causing severe delays and cost overruns, impacting every BIE school in South Dakota. You know, I just want to reiterate that, you know, we've been working diligently to increase our budgets. Our schools come here, we talk to our leaders and increase our BIE budget. One of the most important things that we talk about is that because of the operation and maintenance challenges, our buildings are really old, so we take money out of ISEP, which is earmarked for education, teacher salaries, et cetera. And we take money out of that pool to make up for shortfalls in operation and maintenance because schools are very old. The other piece is that because of the, I say financial poverty, many of us we are very rich in our culture. We speak our language, we sing our songs, we practice our ceremonies. So as a tribal person, we're still very rich in our culture. The thing that holds us back is financial poverty. And we have many tribal communities that are in that a place called financial poverty. So consequently, part of our challenge is we want to make sure our children are fed. So even though the United States Department of Agriculture under the CANS program is where we get our food money, it goes from the federal government to the state sends it to the school. However, we're limited in how we create that food. The other thing that really challenges us is that the CANS program only pays for one staff person in a school. My school is over 1,000 students, so we have 8 people in the kitchen. So we have to take money out of ISEP to make up for the staff that works in the kitchen to cook the food and feed our children. In other words, I mean, this is a small opportunity to really share with you that we know what we need and we know what we want. And we don't want to blame anybody. However, that system, and this is our recommendation, a system within the Department of Interior it may have been there for a long time. And maybe that system needs to be assessed and changed to allow for quicker response as the monies come in for repair and replacement of schools. I'm not sure how many pages of documents there are on regulations, but
Sure.
I'm sure that system needs to be changed.
And thank you,
so-
Ms. Fire Thunder. We just have 1 minute here. So obviously staffing's an issue. There's resources issues all over. We really want to tackle waste, fraud, and abuse when it comes to funding so we can better see how to appropriate those funds. And that's why we had we go to inspectors generals and ask them the questions like $13.8 million of unallowable spending at 24 schools, and having $1.2 million transferred to federal funds to offshore accounts. So we want to be sure that we are using those monies wisely. And I really want to know, how is the communication between your BIE management officials, your director? There's been about 68 investigations referred to the IG. I think 1 was investigated, and approximately 32 were sent back to the BIE to investigate themselves. So in communicating with your director or the managers there at BIE, how effective is that in helping with the policy and making sure the money that is given to you is appropriately allocated?
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a time? Thank you so much for that question. We do have a good working relationship with the Bureau of Indian Education, with our directors and even our regional directors. When we look at the larger systemic issue of funding and how is we have to compete with 50% less than what any public education school receives as far as per student. We look at tribally controlled schools, and we don't want to be lumped into this misuse with tribally controlled schools versus BIE funded schools. Our schools are audited every year, and we go through, our CARES Act was audited this past year, and we came and every tribal school goes through a year audit. So if there was any misuse or misunderstanding, I really think that we have to remember that we're all different entities within the BIE system.
Sure, and my time has expired. I just want to say I also want to have policies that liberate you all to produce from your lands as well, whether that's energy production or food, and have the water to grow that food. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
I think the gentlewoman from Utah is now recognized for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Fire Thunder, I want to follow up with you because you were starting to talk about how these programs could be more efficient. And in the March 2024 report, the Office of the Inspector General recommended that the Bureau of Indian Education ensure that every school have staff trained in managing work orders in the facility management system, including classifying, updating, and closing work orders. To your knowledge, has the BIA ensured that schools have trained personnel?
That is a work in progress.
Okay, all right. So given the recent changes, has BIE offered additional training to any members of your staff regarding the facilities management system? Okay. Is there a problem with the Maximo system, and how does that affect the status of projects? I have 4 minutes. I don't think your mic's on, ma'am. Oh, now it's on.
Oh, now it's on. There you go.
Are we on now? Okay,
Yes, thank you.
You know, that's a really great question because, you know, they changed the system about, what, 5 years ago? So prior to 5 years ago, we were able to track when the Bureau came in and did an assessment of need. And then over here, what it was going to cost. And then over time, we saw a declination that we never got adequate funding for the need. So when we were able to use those numbers to tell Congress that the operation and maintenance dollars, this is what we needed, this is what we got, were diminishing, to show that those dollars that are diminishing were taken out of ISEP, which is for education. So we're using these numbers to tell a story. And here's my schools feel like they changed the system to the Maximo system. So the Maximo system is very difficult to get into at times to really get the true numbers. So when you look at the operation and maintenance need, this is what they say you need, and this is what you get. And over years, it's diminished, so we're not getting adequate money for operation and maintenance. Now, the reason why this is so crucial and important for us is that our buildings are super old. Some of those buildings are 70, 80, 90 years old, and consequently, the systems are arcade, they're old and antique. And so it costs extra money to heat those buildings, and especially right now in the wintertime, some of those old buildings. And so we're spending additional resources, money out of our ISEP to make up for making sure our schools are heated. And so this is why this is for us as our tribal schools. No matter how we look at this, we all need those schools replaced. Because once you replace those schools, you're going to modernize them. And once those schools are in operation, it's not going to cost so much money to maintain them. This is why it's so important for us to advocate for repair and replacement of those schools on that list. And I do believe there might have been 80 schools on that list.
Wow. So once a tribal school receives notice of an award for a project from the Division of Facilities Management and Construction, what's the timeline for transferring the project from the government to the school?
We would love for that to be a great investigative question, because if we were just to look at our current project of an HVAC system, it was put in the system in 2014, and we do not have dollars in our bank.
So would you say, Ms. Becenti, that generally award delays result in underfunded projects?
100%.
Okay, thank you. Also, you're from Farmington. My dad grew up in Bloomfield, so we're practically cousins.
Yes.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Utah. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Crane, is recognized for 5 minutes.
You know, I've heard some pretty cool names in my life, like Vin Diesel, Sting, and Vanilla Ice. But Miss Fire Thunder, you might have the most awesome name I've ever heard. How did you get such a cool name?
Oh, I married a man with a cool name.
Okay. All right.
I only married him because I liked his name.
Okay.
You know, a lot of our names, that's a great question. A lot of our names were in Lakota. and they got translated. This is why we have some amazing names, you know.
Wow.
And we're just so proud of that fact that our last names also connect us to our culture and identity is very intact.
I'd be proud too. I want to begin with tribal communities in my district in Arizona where these BIA failures have left students and teachers pretty high and dry. The Department of Interior's Inspector General released a report just a few months ago about Havasu Pai Elementary School in my district. This report included about 40 pages of recommendations highlighting major safety and health deficiencies that needed to be addressed. BIE's response to those recommendations was that they concur with the recommendations and had implemented a plan to review the deficiencies with Havasu Pai Elementary School. My question for you, Chairman Valesquez, you mentioned that BIE schools on the Fort Apache Reservation are also operating with leaky roofs, broken heating systems, outdated electrical wiring, insufficient security systems, and a lack of housing. Chairman, do you think that we should believe BIE when they say they concur with recommendations and are going to address the problems your schools are facing?
I look at it several ways. Looking at it from a school leadership standpoint, I look at it from the tribal leadership standpoint, and I also look at it from being a father. You know, I'm a product of the tribal Head Start program on my reservation. I've gone through K-12, graduated from there and proceeded on and went to school. Fortunate to get 4 college degrees despite the socioeconomics I came from. Today, I look at it where from the leadership standpoint, there's 2 things that comes to my mind quickly. One is where's the red tape on this? Where's the bureaucracy on this in terms of funding? Earlier, I like what Ranking Member Dexter said earlier. She brought up the student weight scale of a pupil. The BIA gives a certain amount of money. In terms, the state schools give quite a bit of money. So that's one thing I look at. So then from being in school and leadership in the past, I look at it where why is it that my people, my kids are getting this amount as per se, they're getting this amount. I look at it that way. And then I look at it from now being the tribal chairman of the tribe here, I look at it where, okay, now where is the process? What's making this thing tedious? What's making this red tape? Where's the bureaucracy at? Number one. And then number 2, I also look at the management end of thinking also. Okay? I look at it from my side as a school, as a chairman of the tribe. We have 3 schools that are operational on our reservation. We have school boards that are elected, and they're involved in the day-to-day operations of the school. They're policymakers. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, issues of funding, inadequate funding, buildings, that's the reason why I'm here also, that's when I get involved. So my thing is management. Where are we at on management? That's something that I been thinking quite a bit about, because at the end of the day, responsibilities lies heavy with the individuals that partake in the administrative day-to-day operations, whether it's the government, whether it's the tribe, whether it's schools, whatnot. And that's my perceptions, and I'll leave it at that, sir.
Thank you, sir. I yield back.
I think the gentleman from Arizona, the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Troy Downing, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimonies. You know, a little background, I started out my career in education. It's really important to me. and for the last 4 years been working a lot in Indian country in Montana in working on education, specifically on financial literacy and working with our communities. We've got about a dozen tribes in Montana not about exactly 8 reservations, and more than half of those are in my district. It's very important. But I got to start out, I'm incredibly alarmed at last year's report from the Department of Interior's Office of Inspector General that detailed major incompetence at the Bureau of Indian Education. One case identified by OIG involved the Northern Cheyenne Tribal School in my district. And in 2000, BIE reported Northern Cheyenne Tribal School's request to replace exit signs at their school facilities, and more than 22 years later, still failed to do anything about it. Completely unreasonable. These lengthy delays are just not acceptable. So I'm going to start, Ms. Fire Thunder. How is your working relationship with BIE and the Bureau of Indian Affairs on issues that are related to maintenance and construction, and have they been reliable partners in maintaining and improving school facilities?
That's a very good question, sir. But before I answer that, can I just share with you some earlier in all the testimony, and the 2 ladies from the government sitting here, I want the committee to know there are 3 school systems on a reservation. On the Pine Ridge Reservation, we have the BIA schools. We have 1. Then we have the public schools. We have 4. We have 6 tribal schools, local control. Then we have 2 parochial schools. So we have 4 types of education services. Now, I also want to reiterate something, and I want to share this with you. The BIA schools operate under the Department of Defense salary scale. So their employees would make around $25,000. The public schools are $16,000. Oh, I'm WSU, the weighted student unit. And so what we're looking at is a disparity in funding. So even though the BIA schools are there under the Department of Defense salary scales, and then the next one is the public schools at $16,000. So the WSU, how much money the public schools, they get to spend $16,000 per student. The tribal schools, we only get so much that we spend $7,000 per student. I'm sorry, I kind of got a little confused there. So in looking at those numbers, we see so much disparity in terms of salaries. The other, I think it's really important to understand that. The other thing that our business managers have been very good at keeping track of this operation and maintenance. And so again, we have the numbers to show how much money we took out of ISAP to make up for shortfalls. So this is how much the Bureau is giving us for operation and maintenance. And because there's not enough money there, then we're taking money out of this pool to make up for shortfalls over here.
Right.
Yeah, and so we have all those numbers, sir, and how we were able to look at those numbers to really tell the story to the BIE. But at the same time, if the Bureau does not have the resources, then we're still stuck.
Right. Well, understand on the resources, so just kind of a follow-up, it seems that BIE's inability to manage deferred maintenance, repairs, that's obviously affecting your schools. Not just staff, but resources for students, safety, everything. So I appreciate your comments there. In your testimony earlier, you expressed several significant concerns related to the Division of Facilities Management and Construction at BIA. Other than what you just told me, what was your experience with the Division of Facilities Management and Construction? What's your experience been?
Over time, sir, I think it's really important to remember, January was the 50th year of 638. It's the 50 years ago, under the leadership of our esteemed leaders who are no longer with us, and notably James Abrask, I really made sure that we were able to take over and run our own schools under local control. That was 638.
Right.
Okay. And that allowed my community to be able to take the ownership and move ahead on providing education under our umbrella and take it away from the BIA. In those 50 years, sir, we've learned a lot. And I'm going to take a few moments here because I think it's really important to understand. In many tribal communities like the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is a large, vast community, 100 miles, 150 miles. And so in the early 60s, the opportunities for employment were limited. The income level, we had no jobs. Our dads had to work in the fields in Nebraska. They had to pick beans and potatoes. So there was no work. There was no factories. There's nothing a way for a father to earn a living. And yet, at the same time, these leaders 50 years ago, who probably had no financial experience, took on this task of running their own school. Right. So we are the products of those 50 years. And I just want you to know, sir, we're really good. We're really good at running our schools. We manage our finances. The BIA can come in and we do our audits are really good. Yes, girls? We got good audits, a financial audit, programmatic audits, you know, and we're doing a really great job. What we really need, sir, is your help and support to make sure we're putting money into repair and replacing our schools. And that's our biggest challenge, sir. No matter what you say or do, our schools need to be repaired and replaced.
I've run out of time, but I really appreciate your responses, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Montana. The gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Dexter, is now recognized for her 5 minutes.
My state is going to want me to correct that I am from Oregon, and happy to represent Oregon.
I'm sorry.
I grew up in Washington, but thank you. So we are here, thank you all for, one, what you've done with remarkably limited resources to educate your communities. Totally a success story. And what I am hearing is that we're here really looking for waste, fraud, and abuse and how to mitigate or minimize that. But what I'm seeing is that you are doing extraordinary things with very limited resources in buildings that are falling down around you, literally and figuratively. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you have testified here in Congress before on Indian education? Okay, and how many of you after testifying, or did you all testify to ask for increased funding for schools? Is that why you were here? Okay, and I just want for the record that everyone nodded their heads that I can tell. Is that wrong, or is that correct? Okay. How many of you received an increase in funding after that testimony? Nobody. Okay, so we have a constitutional as well as treaty obligations to educate our students, and you have come here. We have asked you to spend your valuable time, and we aren't listening, is what I'm going to say for the record. I also wonder, to what extent, Ms. Fire Thunder and Ms. Becenti, have you and your extensive knowledge and success been incorporated into better processes or helping make better use of the funds that we have? Has the Department of Interior or BIE really brought you in to help learn from you? Ms. Fire Thunder, if you'd go first.
Thank you. That was a great question. You know, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has a TBAC, Tribal Interior Budget Council. So the Tribal Interior Budget Council was created for tribes to come together in like 12 areas to put forward what we're going to need. So under TBAC, Tribal Interior Budget Council, there was a subcommittee on education. So about 5 years ago, some of us were coming. So today, the good news is that this subcommittee, the TBAC, then gives the recommendations for the future over OPM. So I just have to share with you how excited I am, because I was able to get on TBAC and the subcommittee, and then I pulled in Shawna Becenti from Navajo Prep to represent the Navajo area, and then we pulled in Nina. Where did she go? From the Santa Fe Indian School. So those three regions, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona, have a total of 131 schools out of the 187. Wow. So we were able to get our team on the subcommittee for TBAC. So now we are now putting forward the monies that we need to move into the budget for the BIE. So I just want you to know, it didn't happen overnight. This process is very, there's nowhere in our history books or social study books or on the Indian reservation do we learn this process.
Right.
It really is. And so we're here because we're helping each other understand the process, but most importantly, using our data our data to help each other tell the story and move it forward. So we're just excited about the future in our teamwork. So of course, all of this work, invariably, we hope to see more resources to repair and replace our schools. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for your service. And Ms. Becenti, I think, you wanted
I'll be
to.
quick.
Thank you.
There is a need for consultation, definitely. We want to get our projects out the door, and we want to be able to look at how do we streamline that, and how can we be a support. I know at Tribal Interior, if it's coming and looking at processes, that's what we're willing to do, because we do have a lot that needs to be completed, and we're ready to spend.
Very good. And I did send questions to folks, but since some of you have answered them in different ways, I'm riffing a little bit. So, Mr. Valesquez, I'm a pulmonologist, and I am very concerned about the fact that you are using kerosene to light your buildings during the winter, where I'm sure the windows are all closed and carbon monoxide is an extraordinary risk. We know that students who learn in high or good air quality actually have higher performance. And in Oregon, we are actually investing in replacing HVAC systems for exactly that reason. To what extent do you, I heard technology was your first priority, because that is absolutely something that we need to do. And I hear that. Do you feel like the safety of your school currently is sufficient? And is it an imminent threat to the safety of your students? And I don't mean that as a trick question. I also heard you say infrastructure was number one. So,
Right.
yeah.
As I gather my thoughts on what I need to say, what I should say, is going back to Theodore Roosevelt School. It's a school of history that involve a lot of Native Americans. When I perceive this, when I go into the buildings, the building is very, very old. The infrastructure definitely is there, but there's a need for replacement there. Our dormitories are the same way. They're been there a long time, and that's where we house our kids. At times, when we run out of heat, the chief school administrator will make a decision to take the kids home, and we'll close down the residential and take them home also. So the heating system, the air conditioning systems, they're all literally obsolete right now. So there's parts to get those parts to make it operational, it's obsolete. So what do? What they do is they improvise, and they go and they get heaters, and they buy heaters and stuff and put them in classrooms so that they can continue to teach our kids.
Yeah. So I appreciate the chair's generosity with time, and I certainly want to elevate again that the dedication of this group to serving your students, and thank you all for coming. And with that, thank you. I went over.
No, don't worry about that. Mr. Dropik, the 105L leases, why does it have to be mandatory?
If you don't make the funding mandatory, then it becomes something that can be postponed and delayed. And when you look at tribal agreements with banking institutions, if that money's not guaranteed, then the funding's not going to come through. In which case, then you're going to put in a project and have those other items that go into there, and they won't be able to sustain the funding to be able to put in the services and supports, because things can get cut. Delays, if you get into a CR, all sorts of things can create issues that will then delay that funding or not make it come through.
Okay, so now, teaching moment for me here. Okay, so we can run everything out of those 105L leases for schools?
You could, and so the issue that you're likely going to run into is that in some cases there might be some tribes that may not want to engage in them, so that is a possibility. But when you look at that, there will be absolutely tribes that will want to engage in them, and so you'll decrease the need on the BIA funding source, and so they can get caught up, they can get better systems, they can get it. It's going to divide those, and so that it becomes more efficient across. If all tribes were able to do it, you would be able to run those through, and then it puts the dollars in the hands of the tribe. Local banks would be able to engage in it, so there's some economic development opportunities that exist in those as well, but it absolutely could be.
So now, and once again, I need a teaching moment here. If we were to take the 105s in a block grant type style, in a kind of a modified mandatory spending model, okay? Follow me here. It's kind of weird how my brain works. But, and
Mine too.
then you drive it to the local level. Is that what you would say would be the most efficient way of utilizing that money? So that you have autonomy? You just have to be accountable back to the federal government about how it was spent?
Correct. Yep, that is the intent. Obviously, we would want to consult through that and make sure that all of those processes and items don't become 15 or 25 steps as well. But yes, that is the intent, and we do believe and have seen some positive examples of 105L leasing working in tribal communities that we can model it after to eliminate some of that red tape that has been talked about.
So of all the schools you're talking about, if you did this 105, how many schools would it encompass? That would work through the 105L program?
That's a good question.
Right now, schools are able to try to access 105. There's some limitations with it because you have to have lending power. And as a trust tribe, you've got to go to your nation and what are they willing to collateralize for schools. If you're not one that has cash readily and a lot of your is in trust. So for example, it is a great an opportunity, one that we're even as Navajo Prep looking into, but as a trust tribe, we have to find someone to collateralize this large build of a project. And some schools don't have that ability as others. The second is because 105, we say take it out of discretionary and put it to mandatory, there's already federal precedent that you have to fund 105, all 105 leases. And if you move it, then at least it's not competing with Indian on the ISEP program. That can then not have to compete with 105 money.
Okay, well, just in that point, where you just made that point, there's so many appropriators who do not understand that, okay? I'm not an appropriator, I'm on Oversight, and I'm on Natural Resources, two big ones for Arizona, okay? But could we set something up where we keep you together, you folks together, like kind of in a little kind of a, where you can bounce ideas off? Because I think the more we understand what limits you, we can build it on this side. Does that make sense?
I think 105 has such an amazing opportunity that definitely for large capital builds, such as total school replacement, it is a process, and it's one that we would love to look more into and explore, especially for schools, BIE schools, and tribally controlled schools.
Could I ask a favor of all four of you to kind of help get, I think we'll have a bunch of questions in regards to this, because I want to simplify the problem. I mean, we got money going everywhere, and we have no idea where it's going. We have no accountability whatsoever. You know, you talked about the COVID funding. We spent between $4.8 and $7 trillion, and we don't have one receipt, not one.
Do you look up tribally controlled schools? We even have printed hard receipts on paper, taped to paper. So just so you know.
Well, see, here's what I'm going to get back to you. See, under the National Emergencies Act, the Secretary of the Treasury is supposed to give that to us. Okay? So we have nothing. You may have it, and we still want that, I'll tell you, because it's really going to come through. But I think this facilitates a really, and to ask the ranking member, kind of, I don't think your appropriators know this, do you, the 105L?
Oh, no, that was definitely one of the questions. That's a great question.
Yeah, so I would love to try to see if we could do that, because if we could simplify it, streamline it, and put it in that fund, then we're going to get better accountability, and everybody wins. Okay, last but not least, on consultation, the federal government tried to push consultation through this last quarter, or the quarter before, in September. They put out a proposal. They actually noticed that not only the Native Americans, but cities, towns, and counties were not getting due notices. Okay, so we're all in this together, so I think we can work. And in infrastructure processes, I think there's a lot of opportunities here, you know, because some of the things we're looking like in Arizona, to give you an example, water. Northern Arizona, there's a perfect system storm coming right now for the water. It's looking at a co-op. And I'll tell you what, you're talking about something to how to leverage. There you go. Okay. Last but not least, Mr. Valesquez, I got to know, when I first ran, I got to know Chairman Lupe. What a character. What a character. So, thank you. Yes, Miss. Go ahead.
Mr. Gosar, I would be remiss if I did not share with you the disparity on my reservation. The 4 school systems get money differently. So one of the areas that we've really taken a hard look at, the 4 public schools on the Pine Ridge Reservation get impact aid. Impact aid is a nice chunk of money that the 4 public schools get. So we could drive across my reservation and see their nice new buildings they're building. And they're able to use that money, and I may be wrong in making this assumption, but again, there's a guaranteed chunk of money coming to that public school on a year-to-year basis that can be used as collateral to borrow money to build new buildings. You see, those are some of the things we're looking at, sir, to understand the disparity. And so our public schools on the reservation have some really, really nice buildings.
Yeah.
And the rest of us are struggling and asking you for your help so
Yeah.
we can repair and replace our building. I just want you to also know our schools are talking and analyzing and looking at it. We don't want to blame anybody, sir. We don't want them to lose any money. But the numbers show a great disparity. We don't have the collateral. We don't have the other financial support to build new school. We're dependent on the United States government. And again, it's a treaty obligation. So I hope that we're able to share that with you. Thank you.
Well, the fact that you have to explain that so much to me, if I don't know it, some other people don't know it. So I think it would be very beneficial for us. Well, thank you so very, very much. I learned a lot. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the committee must submit questions to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 18th. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for these responses. If there is no further business, we stand adjourned.